They shot Trump. What now?
That happened on Saturday, which is the day I think he was reelected.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Today I am very honored to be joined by Pastor Doug Wilson.
Hi.
Thank you for joining me.
Hello.
Quick introduction on you. You are a theologian and pastor at The Christ Church here in Moscow, Idaho. You're the founder of Logos School and New St. Andrews College, also here in Moscow. Author of the blog and Mablog.
Yeah.
Former member of the Navy Submarine Corps.
Yeah.
You've written a lot of books.
A lot of books.
We're not entirely
sure how many.
how many. And on top of that, you're a husband, a father, and a grandfather.
And now a great-grandfather.
So all of it. So I guess the big news item at the moment is the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump at a rally in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
They shot Trump. What now?
Well, that happened on Saturday, which is the day I think he was reelected. That's what it boils down to. In the few weeks, and of course, this is American politics, so absolutely anything can happen, and so predicting things is dangerous. But the way it looks to me now is there was the full court press on Joe Biden to drop out because of his disastrous performance in the debate and his barely okay performance at the NATO presser. And they were going to try and push him out. But with this, I think you're going to see the Democrats drop their push to get Biden to drop out. Because I think if the Democrats sort of concede the election, they don't want to put the plan before was to sort of bring in someone they thought could beat Trump, which one of their rising stars, a Gavin Newsom or a Gretchen Whitmer. But they don't. But whoever's going to run against Trump now is going to be the sacrificial lamb. So
you don't want to put your best boy in.
Right. So I think they want to, okay, let's just let Biden and Harris be the sacrificial lamb.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that there's a big momentum shift because of the assassination attempt, and it was already shifting, and I think it's going to go that way even harder. And so I think the betting odds are in favor of Trump being reelected.
As long as he makes it to the election.
Yeah. You could be but he just today he picked J.D. Vance as his VP, and probably the first qualification for a vice presidential pick for Trump is you ought to pick someone who is assassination insurance.
Right. Yeah. What needs to be done as far as from the American public standpoint, corporately, as a general public, and also individually, now that we've had, this hasn't happened in a long time?
Yeah. Corporately, what we need to do is start disbelieving absolutely everything the media tells us. Right. So that's the corporate, you could say, well, our responsibility is to get out there and vote and that sort of thing. But the fundamental thing is for us to reject the establishment narrative. All the important people in Washington and the approved important people and the media that is their echo chamber. That's the fundamental duty, is to stop believing the narrative.
Why did we ever believe it in the first place?
Well, because what people do, the reason you believe liars is because they establish credibility various ways. Sometimes they establish credibility by lying, but other times they drift into lying. And there was a time earlier on when you could more or less trust them. So when I was a kid, and there was the three main networks, CBS, ABC, and NBC, and you could tell the liberal slant or the bias, but it was not out of control in the tank crazy stuff like you have now. And so you could always budget for the bias, but now it's just a torrent of lies.
Yeah. What does Trump need to do as far as making it to the election? And also, it's maybe really difficult at this point, but not throwing it by doing something outrageous.
Yeah, he has been pretty disciplined this go around.
He's learned his lesson.
I think he may have learned the lesson. For example, in the debate, he was very restrained, and he let Joe Biden just sort of self-destruct by himself. He didn't get in the way, or he didn't intrude himself into that picture. If he maintains that discipline, which appears that he has learned, and this is something that the Democrats may have done for him by all those lawfare court cases. So he had to, his campaigning time was very restricted because he was in court all the time. And so when he got out to campaign, he had to be really on message. So maybe that helped discipline him too. But if he maintains that discipline, I think he's going to take it walking away.
Yeah, and as far as like security and making sure he gets to the election,
right?
Is he wary of everyone?
I think he should be. Milwaukee is the RNC right now, and I understand that the security there is crazy nuts.
Yeah, as it should be. There's been various stories about who did this. The current theory being a 20-year-old lone gunman.
Mm-hmm.
Does it really matter who did this?
Sure, it matters. So first, it appears clearly that the one who fired the bullet was that guy, right? I've not heard anybody disputing that.
Right.
But whether there was any kind of collusion or accidentally on purpose letting someone with a rifle get up on top of the nearest building to where Trump was speaking was either sort of apocalyptic incompetence on the part of the Secret Service or deliberately some sort of collusion, some sort of invitation to someone like that. Yeah. And both scenarios are really, really terrible. I favor the incompetence scenario because all the indications are that the priority for the Secret Service is DEI hires. We need certain.
Yeah, there was. She said that the head of this of the Secret Service said that she wanted to have 30% women Secret Service people by 2024.
Yeah. What kind of goal is that? That is outlandish, and that's one of the blessings of this episode, because a lot of people looking at that footage are saying, "What the heck? Why? What are those women doing there?" So basically, that kind of DEI commitment is a luxury belief. Okay, if you want, you could get your army to be 30% female as a DEI goal if you're at peace. But as soon as you're in a war, you're betting with real money, and it's no longer an idea you learned in your sociology class back in college.
Right. I saw someone who was a former Marine who had worked with the Secret Service, saying that they're grossly understaffed, and they have the highest divorce rates because you're always on the road, always traveling. And he's like, it's just a bad situation. No one wants to be in the Secret Service,
right.
And yet it's like one of the top priority necessary security features.
Right.
Trump's current platform that he's kind of running on as of after the moment he got shot is kind of a unity platform. What do you think about that?
Well, it depends on everything would depend on what the basis for unity is. So I was concerned about it when I heard him talking that way before his vice presidential pick. Is he going to water down the thing that got him where he is? Well, but with his selection of Vance, it looks like he's going to run as Trump. He's not watering that part of it down. So he's offering, from that vantage point of Trumpism, he's offering an olive branch to the normies on the other side. I think the people who are just out of their minds are not going to be assuaged at all. But there are a bunch of people in the middle, I think, who are seriously thinking about supporting him.
Yeah. This is that kind of showed that when they tried to shoot him, or they did shoot him, it kind of showed that we're kind of in a third world country a little bit. Mm-hmm. How have we gotten to that point?
Well, sort of, yes. But in some respects, I just wrote about this morning. America has been and is a violent country.
Yep.
Right. So we've had 4 presidents who were killed in office: Lincoln, McKinley, Garfield, and JFK. We've had presidential candidates killed RFK, and George Wallace was wounded. We've had Reagan was shot while in office and recovered. We've had Trump and Teddy Roosevelt, who were former presidents running again, both shot during the campaign. So this is kind of something we do. I don't think the violence or the periodic attempts at assassination are the third world country. We are descending into Banana Republic territory, but that was typified by all these bogus court cases brought against Trump, sort of charging the leader of your principal political opposition with cooked up crimes. That's Banana Republic stuff. And to your point, the way we got here was by adopting a relative, basically abandonment of the Christian worldview, adopting a relativistic ethic. If there is no God, then the truth is whatever you want it to be.
When and why did that start?
I would say the serious turn down that bad avenue was with the publication of Darwin. Okay, so the United States has always been on a time lapse behind Europe. So Germany was the worst, and then England was behind Germany, and the United States was behind England in terms of cultural apostasy. But Darwin was the kickoff, I think, of the really bad stuff, and because that removes any transcendental basis for your ethics or your customs or your laws, and I want the Supreme Court in all of your courts to say you may not kill because God said not to.
Right. What was it about the atmosphere that was prevalent when Darwin, let his book go, when he published it, that was conducive to people saying, this is what I want to jump on board?
Okay, this is a challenge to reconstruct, but this is my reconstruction of it. Europe had been thoroughly Christianized in its laws and its customs and its culture and its music and everything. But by the time of Darwin, mid-19th century, you had a hollowed-out Christendom where you had all the forms and structures of Christianity, but a lot of people who were not born again, not regenerate. And that was because of a decline in preaching and doctrinal rigor in the churches and lively application in the churches. And because of that, you had a lot of people who were non-Christian hearts under a Christian culture. Well, there's nothing more suffocating for a non-Christian than being made to live like a Christian. They don't like it, right? And imagine rounding up 200 pagans and enrolling them in a Christian high school, right, where they have to follow all the Christian rules and all the, they have to do all the things. They'd get pretty surly. Well, I think that was the condition of Europe prior to Darwin. There was a lot of simmering unbelief. And what Darwin, to quote Richard Dawkins, Darwin made it possible to be an intellectually respectable atheist. So Darwin provided the mechanism that you could hang on to say, well, I don't believe in God, and here I still have a brain.
Right.
And so that was the thing that sort of opened the floodgates.
And was that something that was specific to evolution and Darwinism?
Yeah. How do we get? Basically, the big question is, who are we? How did we get here? Where are we going? Who do we have to give an account to? And the Christian faith provides one answer to that set of questions, and Darwinism provides another set. We are meat, bones, and protoplasm. We evolved. We answer to no one. We don't know where we're going.
Yeah. But Islam was around back then as well. That wasn't taken on.
Yes, it was. Islam was around in another part of the world, and it didn't become really a factor until World War I, and there was a lot of interaction between Europe and the Middle East. So up until modern history, recent history, the Ottoman Turks were a major power in the world, and in the medieval period, they were the hegemon. They were the big power around the Mediterranean, and the European countries were sort of like Narnia up there, over against Kellerman, right? And so what happened is after the First World War, the European powers walked into the Middle East and carved it up like it was a pie, and that sort of insulted the Islamic view of what faithfulness to Allah will create, which is physical conquest. And so that introduced a crisis of faith among the Muslims. And a lot of the terrorism and the extremism and the jihadism is sort of they're not acts of confidence. They're sort of like kamikaze pilots at the end of a war. Right. It's a desperation move.
Yeah. So this is kind of off topic, but do you think the way to convert or end Islam is to beat it in physical battle, or is that one of the ways?
No, I think basically losing physical battles between Muslims, historically Muslim societies, and historically Christian societies, is a great demoralizer for the Muslims. But I don't think Christianity advances by means of conquering territory. Islam did that. That's how Islam spread. They conquered territory up through Spain. Within 100 years of Muhammad's death, they conquered a bunch of territory and made the Mediterranean a Muslim lake, and just that's how they do it. What Christianity does is different. There were three great battles that sort of were the sign of trouble for the Muslims. They were the Battle of Lepanto, and the Battle of Malta, and the Battle of Vienna in the next century, in the 1600s. And in those three battles, the Muslims were decisively defeated in all three. Lepanto, which is the sea battle, Malta, which was the siege of the island of Malta, and Vienna. And the fact that the Christians won all three ought to have made a thinking Muslim go, uh-oh. Something's wrong. It was not because the Christians were then going to go on the march and sort of seize the Muslim countries. It was more like, why isn't Allah giving us victory? What do we do wrong? Right. And so that was sort of the indication. That should have been for the Muslims, the blinking yellow light on your dashboard. You need a check engine. Something is seriously cockeyed.
Yeah. Do you think that we're in a similar cultural moment where Christians are going to have to engage in physical confrontation? Maybe not against the Muslims, but against violent and radical atheists at this point?
No, I don't think that that's in the cards. I think that we are too far away from any Christian state as a Christian state marshaling forces that would take up arms. That could happen in the 1600s, and it could happen again. I think it will happen again at some point, but I think we're a long way from it happening now. What is most likely is we will have, let's say, there's a turn back to traditional values in the United States. You'll have a case where the U.S. military is a mixed bag, where there's a bunch of evangelicals in the Army and the Navy and so forth, but it's not a Christian Army or Christian Navy.
Do you think that will cause the collapse of the Army like it did in Rome?
No, that's a good question, though. I think it's basically in recent years under the Democratic administrations with things like tranny policies and that sort of thing, and most recently the vaccine mandates. I think the goal has been to set up regulations and requirements that squeeze evangelicals out, right? And I don't know about you, but I do not want a pagan military. When Christians are there and present, it acts as an ameliorating force, where I think the military becomes a much more humane place, conducive in line with Christian doctrine. So I don't think it's going to. I think the evangelical presence in the American military has made it more effective, not less effective.
What do you mean by that?
So when I was in the Navy, the second submarine I was on was when I was stationed there. It was USS Ray, and there was one other open Christian on board, about 130 men. There was one guy who was an open declared Christian, and we would meet together for prayer and do different things. But in the following 2 years, different hidden Christians came out of the woodwork. People became Christians, and things grew to the point where there was about 10% of the crew were Christian, openly Christian, right? And when I got out of the Navy, I had an exit interview with the captain, who was not a Christian at the time. He became a Christian later. But the captain told me that the morale of the entire ship had been transformed by the presence of the Christians, and transformed in a positive direction, meaning that the submarine's military efficiency had gone way up. If you've got a submarine full of grumblers and complainers, that's not what you want.
Not a good situation.
No.
So with all of that said, what do you think is our way back or forward to where we need to be as a country?
The way back / way forward is for preachers of pastors of churches, preachers of the gospel, to start preaching a hot gospel, one that is not only hot but that plugs it, that applies. It's not just a hot gospel within the four walls of the church telling people how to go to heaven when they die, but it also has to be an authoritative declaration that the Word of God applies to everything, right? Christ's authority extends over everything. So no, you can't have homosexual marriages. So no, you can't kill the babies. So, it's not just, oh, you have to repent of your own individual sins so that you can be accepted into heaven. That's true. You have to believe the gospel. That's true. But Christ is Lord over everything. So Christian pastors have to stop being embarrassed by the gospel.
What do you mean by hot gospel?
Sort of giving it, it's a metaphor, unvarnished gospel, telling it like it is. Not, Spurgeon once complained about preachers who preach the way a donkey eats a thistle, very, very carefully. Yes. And you mince your words, and on the other hand, and they do a bunch of to and froing in the pulpit. So the pulpit needs to be filled with "Thus saith the Lord," not "It seems to me." So if you have preachers who say, "Let me tell you a little story about how my wife and I got in a little tiff on the way to church this morning," and it seems to me that what we have to realize is that kind of TED Talk with a Bible verse attached is not a sermon, right? A hot gospel is where you preach something that would have been true had you never been born.
Right. Why have we not been preaching that already?
Because when you do that, you get in trouble. It's really true. When you preach the gospel unvarnished, people come after you.
Yeah. Do you think we're relying on Trump too much to kind of fix our current situation?
I think some people are. I think some Trumpists, or some of the people that fill his rallies, are relying on him too much, right? But I do have hope in different ways, because Trump can get booed at his own rallies when he brags about the vaccine. They're not having it. No. All right. So I don't think you've got a cult where people have drunk the Kool-Aid, and no matter what, if Trump says vaccines are good, I say they're good. If he says they're bad, I say they're bad. No, I think there's a worldview that's taken shape and set up in the Trump world, much of which I agree with, and some of which I disagree with. I don't think it's all good or all correct, but it's a distinctive worldview, and Trump doesn't share all of it. Right. So he is the current leader, current figurehead, current standard bearer. But I don't think he has the kind of absolute control of a dictatorial nature that the liberals are accusing him of having.
Right. What are those things you disagree with, and why does that not push you over the edge to not vote for Trump?
It would be things like some economic issues, like I think some forms of protectionism are just simply counterproductive. It'd be that sort of thing. I was dismayed that he watered down his opposition to abortion. That would be another. That'd be another thing. I think he is. This is a personality quirk, not so much a policy thing. I think he sometimes is. He fights like a saloon brawler. He will say and do things that one ought not to say and do. But in the main, I think he is correct about the global elites. I think he's correct about the ruling elites in our country, the unelected uniparty. I think he's correct about that. I think that if the Trump agenda got implemented, let's run it down the road. Let's say the Trump agenda got implemented. Let's say the Democratic Party implodes and just disintegrates, and another political party forms, and it's, let's say, traditional conservative versus populist conservative. I would have affinities with people on both sides of that divide, and maybe 25 years down the road, I'd be on the other side of the, but right now, what Trump is doing is needed. Probably the best illustration I've heard about Trump is that he's like chemotherapy. Chemo is bad for you. Chemo is toxic. But the reason doctors give you chemo is it's more toxic to the cancer than it is to your body. And if we give you chemo, we think we can kill the cancer faster than we are killing you. And that's what I think Trump is. He's killing he kills the cancer. He's at war with the deep state, which really is the enemy of the American people.
Yeah. How did the deep state come to be?
It's sort of like asking, how did your garden get full of weeds?
You just let it.
Yeah. You just what do I have to do to get a garden full of weeds? Nothing. So I think all we had to do is look and watch. Not look, not watch, not weed the garden.
Yeah. Do you think, in light of Trump's, he came out as less pro-life than we would have hoped.
Right.
Do you think it's the job of Christians by 2028 or 2032 to have a conservative party that's more openly Christian, or is it just our job to kind of reform and see how we can bring?
I think sometimes that's a tactical question, which has to be answered by looking at the facts on the ground at the time. So there are times where I think it would be every Christian's duty to come together in a coalesced political party. Other times I think it's their duty to stay and operate within the existing parties. So what can I do that will save the most babies?
Right. Speaking of a Christian's duty, there's throughout that hideous strength, Ransom and the crew at St. Anne's are spent, as Mr. McGee puts it, raising some very decent vegetables.
Right.
Do you think it's our job as Christians today to kind of raise the decent vegetables and wait for that moment, whatever it may be, for us to act?
Yes, I believe that when it comes time for decisive action, I think it will be obvious. Right. Now, that there's sometimes when you can predict that, oh, this is coming. Other times it's like a black swan. You can't predict it. So when Martin Luther went down to put up his invitation to debate on the Wittenberg door, it was not a radical act. The church door was a bulletin board. That's where you just put up notices. So Martin Luther set Europe ablaze sort of accidentally. Yeah, he was not anticipating that being the reaction, but it was. Other times you can see it coming, right? But when that happens, like when Luther did that and Europe reacted, Europe was a room full of fumes, and Luther lit the spark. Okay, you have to do something. When a revival breaks out, you have to do something. And so we should, I think, labor diligently in our vocations, in our families, in our churches, praying that the Lord would send an opportunity to make a decisive impact, and then act decisively when it happens, when the Lord gives us a breakthrough, we need to pursue. We need to take advantage of it. Until that time, I think we are fighting defense. We're playing defense, wanting to keep a fence or a barrier around our churches and our families and our communities so that we can be obedient within those realms.
Right. But still starting revivals, or at least
Praying,
trying that kind of thing.
You want to be... this is one of the big issues in America. In American Christianity, revivalism is a thing, and our version of it grew out of the Second Great Awakening and Charles Finney. Charles Finney thought it was like a vending machine. If you do these things, then revival will happen. Like we can have guaranteed revival, which is simply false. God's the one who determines if revival is going to be given, but we should be preparing for it and be stacking and splitting and stacking hardwood that will burn for a long time if revival is given. But I can't make the fire come.
Right. There are those moments, though, when you're called to action. One of those moments being your grandson was recently involved in defending Columbia University from some very ambitious and not so well-meaning rioters.
Yes, that's true.
My question is kind of, what do you need to be willing to die for?
Okay. This is one of the things you want from a quarterback, for example, or a general. I'll use the illustration of a quarterback, is you want someone who can read the field, right? He's a good quarterback. He falls back and he can look at the field and he can see where everybody is and he can see what the play needs to be. Right, and he knows what he ought to do. The father who was killed at the assassination attempt was covering his wife and daughter. He did what he was supposed to do without understanding the big picture. All I know is that someone's opened fire. I'm going to protect my people. So. You move in that direction. That's the direction you move. You want to be able to make that decision instantaneously, and you don't have time to do a research paper. You don't have time to write a book. You just have to be steeped in stories. You've read a lot. You've read The Lord of the Rings. You've read all the Narnia stories. You've read That Hideous Strength, and you know what Sam Gamgee would do. Right. And so you do that.
Is it? But it's always worth dying for people, correct?
It's worth dying for the principle. So, right there. So the issue is, you don't have to tilt at windmills. You don't have to go out and let's say the communist Chinese are conducting a massive purge and killing millions of people. You don't have to fly over there to jump in the machine that eats people, right? That'd be fruitless, dumb, and stupid, right. But if you're walking down the street and you see someone trying to set your neighbor's house on fire, well, this is a good Samaritan moment. You know how to read the story.
Yeah. You have mentioned also that there was a time when you were younger that you were mugged.
I was mugged.
What did that kind of teach you?
So. It's a very funny story, actually, because I was a young sailor. I was probably probably 18 years old, and I was either finished quartermaster school, which in the Navy is navigation. So I'd been through boot camp and then quartermaster school in San Diego. And I'd gone into town. This was 1971. Okay, 1971. And I'd gone into town and bought a buckskin coat. And it was a really nice coat. It cost $40, I remember, in 1971 dollars. So it was a nice coat.
Yeah.
And so I was walking back to the bus stop to go back to the base, and was surrounded by, I think, maybe 3 guys. And they said, "Give us your money." And I had like $10 left. And for some mysterious reason, I said, no, I'm not going to give you my money. And so one of them punched me, hit me, knocked my glasses off, and so I'm 18 years old. This is sort of okay. I'm in a situation here. What am I supposed to do? What's a Christian supposed to do? And so I had been hit on the cheek, and I knew my Bible, so I said, "Jesus loves you," and I turned the other cheek. So he hit me again, and so I said, "Jesus loves you," and I turned the other cheek again. So he hit me again. I'm not sure this was proceeding. I'd forget how many times, but at least 3, I think. And so then one of them said, "Give us your coat." Well, I don't know if this is a divine sense of humor thing or if he'd had Sunday school in his background or something, because I knew that the verse right next to turn the other cheek was, if someone asks for your coat, give him your shirt too. Well, I was not about to give them the coat. Because I just paid $40 for the coat. I wasn't going to give her the coat. And so I said, "No, I'm not going to give you the coat." And as soon as I said that, I felt guilty because I knew how radically inconsistent I was being. I was obeying this verse and not obeying, not obeying the next one. If you apply the same hermeneutical principle to both, I should have been either doing neither or both. So I said, "No, I'm not going to do it." And I felt guilty immediately. So because I felt guilty, I gave them the $10 that I had. And as soon as they got the $10, they ran off to buy more wine or pot or whatever it was. And as soon as they ran off, I knew that was the wrong thing to do. So I screwed this one up.
Strike 3.
Strike 3. And I remember walking back to the base, having dinner, being I remember how it felt. Trying to chew I was having steak for dinner, and chewing steak was difficult. Pondering what should I have done? Yeah. What should I have done? And I decided after reflection that I should have either fought or run when they first accosted me, because they weren't accosting me because I was handing out tracts or doing street preaching. They weren't attacking me because I was a Christian. They were attacking me because I was a sailor that they could get something from. And after they were done with me, they could go on to the next innocent citizen. And, so I should either have resisted them and fought, or I should have taken off. Just had nothing to do with them. But what I did, inconsistently trying to obey this verse and not that one, was not smart.
Yeah, but you did keep the coat.
I kept the coat.
There you go. Do you still have it?
I don't. I don't know what I would have. I don't know where it went.
That's unfortunate. But you've also mentioned that you kind of, in that moment, learned, I should have thought about this earlier.
That was the big takeaway, is the crisis is not the time for working out your exegesis. You want to study these issues beforehand.
So with that in mind, if our government were to say, we're going to start sending people to Ukraine or Gaza, wherever it is, what is the right move?
Yeah, let me think about it. No.
Okay.
Right. So and a lot of this has to do with how open and shut it is, right? There are situations where I think it would be a Christian's duty to volunteer and go fight. So I'm not a pacifist, and I think it would be appropriate under certain conditions to fight, but particularly to fight to defend the country. rather than foreign adventurism. Now, this is another issue, but let's say war breaks out in Ukraine, and we all know that the president is up to his elbows in dirty Ukraine oil deals, and the whole thing stinks. And I think Christian young men should avoid being drafted and resist being drafted and resist going over there? Yes, I think they should. If you enlist in the Navy or the Army before something breaks out, and you enlist under President so-and-so, but then the next president, before your hitch is up, is elected and installed, and he gets into a war that you don't approve of, I don't think you're the one that enlisted. And unless it is manifestly ungodly, what you're being commanded to do, you should just fight. You should do you should do your duty. But in just war theory, there is a distinction made between jus ad bellum and jus in bello. Justice with regard to going to war, and justice with regard to your behavior in war. So the jus in bello has to do with the prohibition of war crimes, shooting civilians and that kind of thing. In those scenarios, the Christian should always disobey orders. If you're commanded to kill the women and children, you must disobey. But jus ad bellum, evaluating all the reasons why you're in the war in the first place, the average rank and file soldier or sailor is not in a position to evaluate that.
Just doesn't know.
Yeah. Doesn't have the facts.
Yeah. How do you fight something like, obviously one of the reasons it's been prospected that Trump was shot is because he's pretty anti-war, especially anti-war outside of the U.S. Right. How do you fight the military-industrial complex, which seems to be one of maybe the driving reason why we go to war in places where...
Yeah, there are people who want to advocate for perpetual
violence.
War. Yeah. And there's a lot of money to be made in arms, a lot of money to be made in munitions, a lot of money to be, it's as that cartoon character, Daddy Warbucks, and so that kind of thing, there are vested interests that want that kind of perpetual military presence. But the purpose of a military should be to avoid wars, and if one breaks out, to have it be very short and decisive. Instead of having something that just drags on and on and on and on.
Is it the job of America to kind of be the world's police?
No.
Okay. Can you explain more? Because we have been for quite some time.
Actually,
or at least trying.
Yes, we try. So I think that there's a nuanced thing here. During when the Second World War was coming to an end, and it was clear that the Allies were going to win, we held a conference. The United States held a conference in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. All these countries from all over came. And we did, after the Second World War, we were the one industrial power that had not fought the war in our territory. We had this huge military advantage. Our Navy, we had geared up, and we had this huge advantage. And had we done the traditional thing, we would have established an empire. Right, we would have planted the flag all over the world, and you guys start paying us tribute and that sort of thing. But we didn't do the traditional thing at all. And what we did is we saw that we were going to be in an adversarial relationship with the Soviets, and we told the other nations there that if they signed on with us, we would be the world's Coast Guard. So instead of the world's policeman, we became the world's Coast Guard. We guaranteed shipping from anywhere to anywhere, which meant all these other nations didn't have to build their own navies. We made the United States is a maritime power, and we guaranteed the safety of the oceans basically for everybody, even our competitive rivals. And that was a deal too good to be true. And so everybody signed up. And what people are calling, I'm following the arguments of Peter Zion here, who wrote a book called The Accidental Superpower, which I think is a compelling argument. What people call globalization is not the evolutionary climb of man up to this pinnacle of evolutionary progress. Globalization is simply the result of the firepower of the U.S. Navy. Okay, which meant that all these countries could grow into prosperity because they didn't have to build a navy too, right? So, and now, having said that, we had the world's Coast Guard. The neoconservative movement started going in a little bit too eagerly for the world's policeman thing, which was not really our strong suit. So nation building just doesn't work. So I think we did an outstanding job patrolling the oceans. I think we did a lousy job introducing Jeffersonian democracy to Iraq. We did a lousy job introducing Jeffersonian democracy to Afghanistan. We did a lousy job. We just can't do it, right? So being the world's policeman and the democracy exporter, we're no good at all at that. Now, on the globalization front and on the oceans front, the challenge is that the United States is becoming increasingly isolationist, or it'd be better to say semi-isolationist, because someone like Trump would want to have merchants trading with other countries, but he does not want foreign wars, does not want land wars, didn't have any wars under his presidency. And so he doesn't like that kind of thing at all. And so, and I think that that's an appropriate suspicion of foreign entanglements.
And it's up to him to fight the military-industrial complex.
Correct.
Right. Okay. What is God's kindness in all of this madness and mayhem?
God's kindness, I think one of my favorite little mottos or favorite little mantras is that we should take heart because in the long run, stupidity doesn't work.
Which is fantastic.
Yes. It's to borrow a phrase from our environmental friends, it's not sustainable. Stupidity is not sustainable.
Right.
You just keep running into the way things are.
Yeah. And so eventually we will have to come to grips with the fact that God is king. And so, right. Do you think we've gotten to the point, though, where things kind of have to get worse before they get better?
I think we're pretty close to the bottom. but it's hazardous to say that, because I would have said the same thing 10 years ago, right? How much crazier can it get? Well, apparently there's quite a bit more distance to go. So I suspect that we're certainly nearer the bottom than we used to be, but I don't think we're as near the bottom as conservatives like to think.
Really?
Yeah.
Why do we like to think that?
Well, because we're optimistic. We want our kids and grandkids to grow up in a normal country. Mm-hmm. We don't like clown world.
Yeah. One of the ideas that's kind of been circling around is that, Christians and Muslims and Catholics should all join up together against the atheists.
Yeah. So I understand the principle. If we had an alien force from outer space invade the world, I wouldn't have a big problem teaming up with the Muslims and the Buddhists to fight the aliens from outer space. But there we'd be co-belligerents as opposed to allies. We'd just be happening. It's the same sort of thing. If you had a Muslim and a Hindu and a Christian and a Buddhist lived on the street and somebody's house caught fire, I don't mind everybody helping out to put the fire out.
Because you got a common enemy.
You've got a common enemy. You're co-belligerents. You're fighting the fire, not for the same reasons necessarily, but you're all fighting the fire together. When it comes to teaming up with Muslims to fight the atheists, well, why not team up with the atheists to fight the Muslims? Who's the greater threat?
Yeah, I think the idea is just because we both believe that there's a God.
Right.
And so
but is that a shared lowest common denominator God, or do I team up with the atheist who doesn't believe in Allah and I don't believe in Allah? We don't believe in the same God.
Right. Yep. Where does Christ Church come into all this mess?
So we believe that the task of the church is to equip the saints to live like Christians in the era that they are living in. So, and you do that by preaching and teaching the Bible, teaching practical Christianity, how to love your wife, how to respect your husband, how to confess your sins, how to worship God, how to bring up your kids in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. That kind of equipping the saints to live within the perimeter that they can reach is the best thing you can do for them, because you don't want to fill their heads with all sorts of things going on in Washington, D.C. or Boise or Brussels that they can't do anything about.
Yeah.
You want to equip them to live the way they ought to live where they're living.
Right. Yeah. As we kind of wrap up, I'd like to ask, what's your biggest regret?
Yeah. I would have to say, the thing that chafes me the most is my bandwidth. I wish I could read faster. I wish I could take it in more thoroughly. I wish I could be more efficient in output. So basically, I run up against the length of my tether frequently. So I want to do more, understand more, pursue more, and I just don't have it.
What's your best piece of advice to anyone watching?
Love God, hate sin.
Pretty simple.
Yeah, pretty
easy
simple.
as that. Where can people find you online and Christ Church and everything?
So if you go to dougwils.com, DOUGWILS.com, that goes to my blog, which is Blog and Mablog. And then if you open up the front page, there on the front page is a link or a portal to pretty much everything I'm involved with. New St. Andrews, ACCS, Logos School, Canon Press. So if you find your way to my blog, there's a way to find your way into everything else.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. See you guys.
You would be out a little. You would be out a little.